Welcome back, everyone. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is your special guest host, Gwyneth Giangrande. This episode is part of a mini-series of the EdUp Experience, where I speak to education leaders about student wellness and the intersection of music and mental health. I'm privileged to have as my guest today one of the most accomplished professionals in higher education, Dr. Chris Howard, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Arizona State University, which is ranked by U.S. News and World Report as the most innovative university in the country. Dr. Howard is a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and earned a doctorate from the University of Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. He also earned an MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School. Dr. Howard's military career included service as a helicopter pilot and an intelligence officer, and he was awarded a Bronze Star for service in Afghanistan. And with Dr. Howard's credentials, I admit to being wildly in awe and a little bit intimidated. So welcome, Dr. Howard, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Gwyneth. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to have you here.
I'm happy to do it. Let's just jump into it.
Yeah, of course. According to many reports, student mental health is worsening, and some are calling it a crisis contributing to poor overall health, academic achievement, graduation rates, and, tragically, an increase in teen suicides. A recent survey by Inside Higher Education found that more than 50% of students say that they feel chronic stress. 75% of students say stress is negatively impacting their ability to learn, focus, and do well academically. And only 25% strongly agree with the statement, "I know where I can seek help on campus if I or a friend is experiencing a mental health crisis." So that leads me into my first question. What is your reaction to those statistics? And do you think student mental health is worsening? Or are we just becoming more aware of how pervasive it has always been, as the subject of mental health becomes destigmatized and more people are comfortable talking about it?
Well, I so often say my reaction to the numbers is sadness.
Yeah.
Anytime people don't feel well, they don't feel safe, they don't feel like they're getting supported or help, it makes me feel really, really badly. I've been in higher education as a leader for almost 20 years, having served as a president of two other places before this, and now chief operating officer and a vice president for another institution. So, and been on boards of several, so I'm around this a lot, and it just breaks my heart. I'm also a father to college graduates, so it cuts close to home. So that's my first reaction. In terms of do I think it's worse? Do I think it's people are more open about it? Do I think it's reported? There's more of a magnifying glass. Our sort of critical lens. I think it's all of the above. I think that in light of what happened with COVID, in light of what's happening with the George Floyd social uprising, upheaval, what have you, in light of what's happened in sort of the economy, what's happening in world affairs, I think, and also with social media and the double-edged sword of social media, which is great, but also can be very, very difficult, especially for young girls. There's been a lot of studies about that. I think all that's conflated to make it tougher on mental health for people going to high school, going to college. People going to high school and college, I think, also are more open about talking about it. I'm 54 years old, so I'm in a different generation. So me and your dad are old people, so we're a different generation. This generation, I think, is more willing, and is good to talk about it. So maybe the stats are higher because of that.
Yeah.
And then finally, I also think that there's just more reporting on it. I think that we just do a better job in not solving it, but at least talking about it. So all those things make the numbers higher than maybe they would have been otherwise. But nonetheless, I'll go back to my first point. We need to do more about it. And I'll talk in a few minutes about some of the things I think we're doing well. But I think that this definitely, if it's not a crisis capital C, it's definitely a crisis lowercase c.
Yeah. Even going to an all-girls school, I think that social media has really just impacted young girls in general to fit this sort of beauty standard, as well as the pressure of college being in a small school, even a big school. It's just, you feel the pressure and all the students feel it, and there's sort of this stigma around being okay with it and kind of going on. But I think now that students are talking about it more and being more open, as you said. The statistics have risen and students are more open to talk about it. And so I think there's a lot more resources at schools. And I know when I was younger, we didn't have that. But in recent years, especially after COVID, the rates of those student counselors and kids actually going to talk to them about mental health, it has risen. And so I completely agree with what you've said. So moving on to my second question, what factors do you think are contributing to this problem? I touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. I think you said the same thing. I mean, you can't discount coming out of COVID, and that just, there's been learning loss, and there's been a sense of, I think, a real loss. I mean, there's probably some PTSD associated with coming out of COVID. I mean, it's just really whiplash. And then layer on top of that, George Floyd's murder, and I think it just kind of turned our world upside down, and we're just slowly but surely adjusting to that. So I just probably can't overstate the impact of COVID on people's mental health and the lingering impacts. And there's long COVID physically, there's long COVID mentally, I think. And then I think there's that reincorporation into how society really is supposed to operate. Truism, what's the word I'm looking for? Truancy is up in schools. So even when schools are open and functioning disease-free, students are not going. This is happening in high school, and to some extent college, but so it's probably the worst it's been in decades. Where now students can go to school and they're simply choosing not to go. They're trying to readjust to that. So that entire readjustment period, I think, is probably the most compelling part of it. But it might be, there's probably even more so because of the couple of other things we spoke of a few minutes ago, Gwyneth.
Yeah. I know, even for me being in COVID, it is really hard to go from being completely isolated and moving online. And then, of course, as you talked about, the George Floyd movement and even the climate crisis or things that are going on in politics in the U.S., it's all just, it's a crazy time. We don't talk about how that could also affect student mental health, but I think it does in a way because you hear adults talking about it, and as you get older, you start watching the news more. And even with the recent crisis in Israel.
Not to mention Ukraine, Russia.
That as well.
I think when people feel a little unmoored and they feel like they lose a sense of agency, feel empowered. And it's just so much, man. It's just so much.
I know.
So, and it's a lot. So you got to think about what do you do to find your place, find your peace. Recognize there's a certain level of anxiety and that we all kind of deal with, and how to deal with that, and how to be functioning despite that. And it's not easy. And you get through one thing, then another thing kind of lands on top of you. That's just where your friends and your family and your faith and your support mechanisms, including mental health professionals, but also other mechanisms. We're going to talk about technology in a second. There are other things to help us sort of find something to be centered, because, life's like this. Somebody told me years ago, you're either in a storm, headed into a storm, or headed out of a storm. Yeah. So I always say you better get a rain jacket, a raincoat. so you know you're going to hit it, but I'm protected. I know I'm going to get wet, but I'm not going to drown. So that's what we're trying to get to with our young people.
Totally agree. Talking about technology, moving into my next question, how can technology and data improve early intervention?
There's a couple of things. There's a macro argument because we know more about the brain. We know more about behavioral patterns that perhaps lead to suicidal ideation or self-hurting or alcohol abuse or whatever. We just know more. The corpus and the whole collection, accumulation of knowledge about what's happening in terms of mental health is just sort of there in aggregate. Then secondly, at the individual level, between wearables, I know my wife has an Apple Watch. I don't happen to have one, but between wearables, between your iPhone or whatever your cell phone is, your smartphone is, there are ways to track how you're doing. Yeah. I was traveling recently, and unfortunately, I was with my mom and her friend, and she slipped. She's absolutely fine. Okay. But the watch said, "You seem to have fallen. Do you want me to call 911? Were you doing things that are tracking biorhythms for sleep because you're not sleeping well. Is something going on? Do you need to call? You can imagine. Do you need me to call someone? Your heart rate goes way up. As that macro data, as I described, gets more and more accessible and sort of analyzed, it can tell you how you can be better. It can prompt you. It can connect you. Do you need to call a friend? You seem a little blue. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I'm calling your friend now. Things like that. You seem to be, I don't want to get too big brother, big sister on this, but you seem to be having a fight with your friend. Maybe you need to get off the phone with her now.
Yeah.
things like that, again, without making it sort of icky, but just recognizing that we can know ourselves in aggregate better. We can know ourselves individually, then we can alert, we can prompt, and we can direct and redirect in a way that keeps us healthier.
There's even apps that help with just daily affirmations like I am strong, I can get through this, that sort of thing. And I actually know a lot of my friends at school who just have it, and they send daily reminders to your phone. So you're having a tough day at school, you just see like an affirmation, like you can do this. And even something as simple as that really helps and kind of keeps you going. With technology just being able, as you said, having those Apple Watches, like, have you fallen? Or also talking about, like, are you okay? Your heart rate seems to have risen. And you can use technology in a good way for mental health in that sort of sense, as well as physical health. Yeah, it has definitely improved early intervention. How have colleges been addressing it adequately? Are there any new strategies and resources that you see emerging recently just about mental health or using technology as well?
Yeah, I think that's the other positive thing that came out of COVID. One of the things that came out of COVID is that telemedicine, telehealth, opening up to allow people in one state to talk to someone in another state that's a mental health professional. So we've sort of open up the aperture for, again, as you pointed out, physical and mental health. And that's much more scaled and much more common. So that's happened. And again, there's also a proliferation of applications, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, social workers, all these, the people that want to save the world and people want to make the world better by coming up with better technology are all converging because there's a space for this need. And so really cool things are popping up all the time, much of like we just described a second ago, using wearables, using your smartphone. And I think there's going to be more to come. The next part is going to be generative AI, because it allows, again, things to go, to be able to scale and go a bit faster. If we all had the situation where we could go and see a licensed clinical professional on a regular basis, that'd be great. But our society's not set up to where we can do that.
Yeah.
So we need things that they may not be optimal, but they're still good and they're helpful. So I think there's more of that coming down the pike. Major research institutions are doing it. Major venture capital funds are funding it. Really, really smart entrepreneurs are leaning in. And I think AI is going to be the next lever to pull to help support this effort.
Yep, completely agree. My whole thing is music as medicine, or even athletics, extracurriculars. I think it can really help with a student's mental health and managing stress. Recent studies have made it a growing field. Do you think that it really helps? And talk a little bit about it.
Well, there's a couple of different ways to approach it. On the athletic side, I was a college football player, played at the United States Air Force Academy. My brother played at Baylor University. My sons were both D3 athletes, one at Middlebury, one at Swanee, and my niece played volleyball at Wake Forest and Furman. So a lot of people play sports. At the highest level of competitiveness, it can be a bit stressful.
Yeah.
Performing at levels that are almost commensurate with professionals. So there's a twist there, but most people are not playing sport at that level. And I think the NCAA has tried. I was part of the group that rewrote the constitution of the NCAA, putting mental health and physical health at the forefront of student athletes, because with the workloads and the practice, it can be problematic. So, but that's one thing. That's a unique set of students that are student athletes that have opportunity, but additional stressors we have to monitor. For most other people, the idea of R&R, rest and relaxation, to be able to let yourself go, and not to be so wrapped around the axle with your iPhone, to get away from social media, do something that just brings you pleasure and joy in and of itself. Throwing a frisbee, catching a football, playing a violin, listening to a violin, painting, going to a museum. These are things that let the mind just sort of wander and play and, breathe, which is a big part of your mental health, by the way, is just breathing. Do a lot of stuff with your breathing. So, but in terms of music, it's interesting you mentioned that. I know you have a background in this. ASU has a degree in music therapy. One of the few. I think it's a master's degree, but we have one of the best programs in the country for people that want to study music and use music for therapy in terms of mental health and physical and mental healing. So we're like another level of it out here at ASU. So those who are interested in that field, look up the ASU website, and maybe Gwyneth can send you a link to it, and you can find out more about the program. But I think anything that allows you to have a sense of space, a sense of calm, and also a sense of distraction from all the things that are eating at you can be very, very useful. It's amazing. We go from high-tech stuff to basically, going for a walk in the park, again, throwing a frisbee, going for a jog, jamming out with your guitar or your Guitar Hero or whatever. I think these things are all directionally useful.
Yeah, even as you progress in high school or college and things start to get harder and more stressful, I've noticed that from me in freshman year to now me in senior year, I go for walks daily just to relieve my mind, just take a walk through Central Park, because that's the closest I have to nature in New York City. But it's super relaxing. And even with I agree, there are certain aspects of sports, of even doing music at a high level or art at a high level, it can be very stressful. And what happens a lot is there's so much pressure around it to be the best, and especially as kids are trying to get recruited for college or doing auditions or creating a portfolio, things can get very stressful, and it kind of takes, okay, well, I love this sport, I love doing art, I love playing music, but at the same time, there's just so much pressure around college applications that it almost takes the fun out of it to a certain extent. And I've seen it with myself, even getting ready for different auditions and getting my portfolio ready. And even my friends who are competitive athletes trying to get recruited. You just have to hold on to the love for that activity and just remember that this is something you want to do. This is something that you love. And don't forget that as much as you want to perform well and as much as you want those colleges to see how talented you are, the most important thing is just making sure that you still love what you do and that's what you want to do, and not to take the fun out of it, because they're supposed to be fun. All of these different extracurricular activities are supposed to be fun, and they're supposed to be stress relievers to a certain extent.
I think the idea of trying to make sure you maintain a certain sense of perspective.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, those of us have gone through more of it, so I've been your age, you've never been my age, but I think this too shall pass, and as life goes on, you'll look back and you'll say, this was the funnest time of your life.
Yeah.
You don't have responsibilities, like you don't have a family, you don't have kids, you don't have some other things, you don't have a mortgage you have to have paid and things like that.
Yeah.
So learning how to cope and have perspective are very important. But to your point, finding your joy is very important, and things that were joyful that become more stressful, because there's something about sweating and being intense, getting ready for a recital or a game. There's a level of stress that, again, this actually exhilarating.
Yes.
Yes, I want to do this well. You've invested in it. But if it gets to a point where it's unhealthy, then it's unhealthy. And if it's chronically unhealthy, then you want to take a step back and say, well, am I in the right place? Am I doing it for the right reason? Am I doing it to get someplace? Am I doing it to impress somebody? Am I doing it for my parents or what have you? And there's nothing wrong with trying things, but if it gets to be unhealthy, we need to take a step back. So I think this has been a good conversation, because we've kind of differentiated between, competitive athletics and competitive, musicians are really competitive. Yes. doing music in competitions, right? As opposed to doing it as leisure, and then sometimes they kind of slide in between. But these are all very important. They have impacts on your mental health. And the other part I would just say about athletics and about music also is that on the competitive side is that by putting yourself through these challenges and getting through them, it creates some psychic armor and some confidence that, hey, I got this.
Yeah.
Or when you do it and don't do well, and you learn and you get better, you also develop some resiliency because you're gonna fail. I don't care if you're failing catching a football or playing a violin or taking a test. We all fail sometimes. Fail in life, and we just have to pick ourselves up with the appropriate support and within certain reasons and boundaries. We try to keep it healthy on the healthy side, healthy failure, healthy setbacks, things that are, push you back a little bit, but don't knock you on your behind. So, hopefully this is directionally making us better and healthier, not stultifying us and making us sad and melancholy.
Yeah. And do you think just extracurriculars and kind of participating in them, do you think it promotes academic achievement and they're directly related, kind of like it manages stress to a certain extent? Do you think it can harm academic achievement or help it?
You can overdo things. I tell students all the time that, when you first come to college, first thing you should do is you should go to class. And get your books right, get your study, it's like the old parable of the glass jar, and you put in the big rocks first and then you pour in the sand. Otherwise you can't get the big rocks in. The big rocks are your academic performance and routines and what have you. Now, having said that, too much of just academics also fries your brain as well. So again, what we're looking for is some sort of level of balance, some level of, and by the way, the balance is going to be over time. It's, there'll be times where you need to be all academic and more intense, and then sometimes you can let take your foot off the pedal on that. But you can do too many extracurriculars, so much so that you're actually hurting your study. But but it's good to do enough to where you feel fulfilled. And a lot of times your co-curricular, which is tied to your classroom, and your extracurricular is tied to classroom work, motivates you and make you a better student as well. So it's all about, we talked about that watch. You got to check yourself, Gwyneth, to see if you're on track. Make sure the biorhythms are lined up. If they're not, make that appropriate adjustment.
Oh, yeah. I'm such a person that loves to be busy. And so I've calmed down a little bit now because just the academics have gotten crazy. But when I was younger and, my beginning years of high school, it was like I'd go from sport to dance to music, and then I'd get home at 9 o'clock. And you know what? To a certain extent, it would motivate me to get my homework done in a short amount of time. But then at the end of the day, you just start getting burnt out. And so it's kind of like you have to let yourself breathe and say, what do I really want to do? And what can motivate me to do well in my academics, but at the same time, it's not overwhelming me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's how I found my balance, because I used to be a 3-season athlete doing dance for 2 hours every day, also doing music lessons, and it was just too much. And then that also affected my mental health personally. And for anybody, any of my friends that I talk to, or high school or college students, when you overdo your schedule, that's when it starts to get too stressful.
Yeah, over programming is a big deal.
Yeah,
so people can over program. Parents can over program too for their kids as well. So we have to be mindful of that. So yeah.
Okay, well, any final thoughts you would like to share?
No, other than I enjoyed the conversation, and
Great.
whoever's listening to this podcast, thank you for tuning in, and take care, and recognize that you are somebody that deserves love, your own self-love, love of your friends and family. And if you need help, you should get help because it's there for you. And there's many different ways to get it. So there we go.
Well, thank you so much for your insights today and your dedication to helping improve student health and success. And thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
I appreciate it, Gwyneth.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Please follow the Zen Student Wellness on Instagram and Twitter, and visit my website, thezenstudent.com. Have a wonderful day.